Thanks so much to Element for sponsoring today's video. The veggies are fresh and the fruit is ripe, so we're soaking up the season with a few yummy dishes to make before the end of summer. Lima beans are getting the recognition they deserve with savory rice sausage bowls. And who says you have to wait for fall to have cornbread? Nope, I'm making our favorite berry cornbread cast iron skillet cake that combines fresh berries with delicious sweet cornbread. And my summer vegetable chowder full of zucchini, squash, peppers, and corn, it's the perfect end of summer soup to get us excited for the cooler days ahead. Get ready for some crave-worthy late summer eats. Or garlic
Mom,
mincer.
I can cut it.
You can cut it? I think I'm gonna cut the garlic.
No, I want to do it.
I know you do. You can help crush it.
I like cutting it.
Lima beans are one of those foods that a lot of people have either never had or they're not sure that they're gonna like. So today I'm gonna show you just how delicious they can be. I'm using frozen lima beans. Usually if you'll find them in the store or at a farmer's market, they usually are always frozen. So I'm using frozen. You could definitely use fresh if you have them. I'm using a 10-ounce package of chicken sausage today, and I like it because it's a little bit lighter, a little bit sweeter, but any kind of sausage will work here. You could even use an andouille style sausage if you like a lot of heat. I'll start by running my knife down the middle of the sausage and split it in half, and then I'm gonna make 1/2-inch slices, but I like to kind of do it at an angle, that way it doesn't just look like a hot dog, it looks more like a fancy sausage, so you can do that little trick just to make it a little more appealing to the eye. So just cut right at an angle into nice thick chunks. Okay, I'll set that aside, and now I'm gonna grab a sweet onion. Today I'm gonna use a Vidalia onion because they're in season and they're just nice and flavorful and so sweet. So it cooks down really well with the sausage and the lima beans and kind of sweetens things up a little bit. So I'm gonna use about 1/2 cup or half an onion, and we're just gonna wanna finely dice that. I just like to run my knife through one way so I get nice little slices, and then I'll go through the other way and get nice finely diced little pieces. I'm also going to use a few cloves of garlic. I have this nice fresh garlic from my garden. I'm excited to use it for the first time. I've never used it before, so I'm going to go ahead and pop out, I'd say about 3 cloves. These aren't huge garlic cloves. They're kind of small, but they'll do the trick. And let's use 4 today. We're going to use 4 cloves of garlic here. I'm just going to give them a little crush with my knife. I'm also gonna grab 1 heirloom tomato, and I'm just using this because it's in season, but you could definitely use little cherry tomatoes or just whatever tomatoes you have on hand. And I like adding the tomato in along with the lima beans. It almost reminds me of like a southern style succotash, and I love that flavor. It's so cozy and homey, so pairing a little bit of fresh bright tomato in this dish really makes the rice and the sausage kind of come to life. So I'm just gonna slice this tomato up and then cut it into nice little diced pieces. Over here, I have a braising pan that I have a lid that will fit on top of it. That way we can cook everything in one pot and let the rice get really soft and tender and fluffy. So in the pan, I'm gonna start by just adding 2 tablespoons of avocado oil. That's gonna kind of get the sausage nicely browned along with those onions. And then to that avocado oil, I'm also gonna add in about 1 tablespoon of butter because I love the combination of butter and oil. Now I'm gonna take the chicken sausage that we already sliced up along with that diced onion, and I left my tomato and my garlic on the board. We'll add that in later, but I don't want that garlic to burn. So I'm gonna go ahead and add this in and get that nicely browned. While my sausage and onions are browning and kind of getting caramelized a little bit, I'm gonna grab my lima beans that I have. I have 1 pound of frozen baby lima beans. You can also use butter beans. I think there's a myth that they're 2 separate things, but they're actually the exact same thing. So if all you can find is butter beans, use those, that's perfect. And then I also have 2 1/4 cups of chicken stock. And that's what we're gonna use to cook that rice in and give it tons of good flavor. I'm also gonna grab a little bit of Cajun seasoning, or you could use Creole seasoning. They're very similar, but you want that nice spicy kind of peppery kick. So I'm gonna measure out 1.5 teaspoons just so I can add it in later when I go back to the stove. So I'll just put it in here, and I'm just gonna do it to taste. And for this amount of rice, I like to do about 1.5 teaspoons of Creole seasoning. And if you can't find it at your grocery store, you can definitely make this yourself, just using a blend of smoked paprika, garlic, oregano, thyme, chili powder, and a little cayenne. So now that the garlic is in there, I've gone ahead and I've added in that rice that I rinsed earlier under cold water and just let it drain while I was prepping the rest of the ingredients. Now I've added that in too, and I'm just kind of letting it toast up in the bottom of the pan. And I'm kind of scraping up all those little brown bits, that way all the flavor's going into that rice. And for this dish, I'm just using a plain white jasmine rice. I like that it cooks really quickly. So if you were using something like a brown rice, it's gonna take a whole lot longer to cook. So for this recipe, just use white. And so I'm just stirring this together. Now that that rice is toasted a little bit and that water's kind of cooked off, I'm gonna go ahead and add in all of that Cajun seasoning. And that's gonna give that rice such amazing flavor. And then I'm also gonna add in the 1 pound of our frozen lima beans, just straight from frozen. You don't have to defrost them, they go straight in. I'll add in chicken broth and stir everything together, and then I'll take that fresh diced tomato that we chopped up earlier and I'll put that right over the top, and at the end we'll fluff it up and everything will get mixed together. Now just bring the pot to a boil over high heat, and once it's simmering, I'll reduce the heat to low and I'll place the lid on and let that cook for about 15 minutes until the lima beans are tender and the rice is nice and fluffy. Then I don't disturb it, I just let it cool for 5 minutes, and after that is when I'll fluff it with a fork. The lima beans are tender and the rice is fluffy. So now it's been cooling for about 5 minutes, and I'm just gonna take a fork and fluff it up a little bit. I like to just pull the rice up so everything's nice and combined, because when we put it in the pot, those tomatoes will sit on top. So you just wanna mix it in a little bit right before serving. Oh, that looks so beautiful. I love all the colors. If you don't have chicken sausage, you could also just use ground sausage and make it almost kind of like a dirty rice. Now I'm just gonna top it off with a little sprinkle of fresh parsley. You could use scallions too, just for a little color, a little freshness. Totally optional though, but I love the freshness it adds. And look how beautiful that is. It's so simple. Rice and lima beans. It's really just a simple and humble food, but once you try this, trust me, you're gonna wanna stock your freezer with lima beans. So now I'm gonna grab some and just give it a little taste, make sure everything tastes delicious. It smells so good. You can smell the kick. And if you like it a little bit spicier, you could end with a little bit of hot sauce on top. Or if you wanna cool things down, you could add a touch of sour cream. Up next, I'm beating fall to the punch with my berry cornbread cast iron skillet cake. Move out of the way, strawberry shortcake. Cornbread is one of my absolute favorite foods, and when my husband Nick and I were first married, he took me to this restaurant up in Pennsylvania, and they had on the menu a jalapeno cornbread that they would then serve for dessert with a berry sauce. It's an interesting combination, but now I'm completely sold on sweet cornbreads. So today I'm gonna make my own variation of that, and instead of making a berry sauce, I'm gonna put berries in the cake and on the cake. It's gonna be the perfect mixture of sweet cornbread and kind of tart sweet berries, and it reminds me of a shortcake when you top it with whipped cream. I love anything you can make and serve in cast iron, and this is one of those cakes that you're gonna make right in the cast iron skillet. You can serve it on the dinner table right in it, so it's really fun. So in this cast iron skillet, I've had 1 stick of salted butter melting over low heat, and I'm just gonna take either a basting brush or a small spatula, whatever you wanna use, and just run some of that butter up the sides. That's gonna grease the skillet and prepare it so that way our cake doesn't stick to it. So now what I'm gonna do is take the rest of that butter and I'm gonna put it straight into a mixing bowl that we're gonna make the cake in. To my melted butter, I'm gonna add in 3/4 of a cup of raw cane sugar. You could actually substitute that cane sugar for raw honey, and that'll make it kind of like a honey cornbread. So if that's a flavor you love, don't be afraid to substitute it here. Now I'm gonna go ahead and cream together the butter and the sugar until it's fully combined. Next, I'll crack in 2 eggs. And to give it that good cakey vanilla flavor, I'm gonna add in a tablespoon of vanilla extract. I love the combination of cornbread and vanilla. It's like the perfect cake for me. I love the texture the cornmeal gives. So add in plenty of vanilla because it's really gonna drive home that cakey flavor. Next, I'll add in 2/3 of a cup of whole milk Greek yogurt, or you can use sour cream. Make sure everything is nice and moist. Now I have all my wet ingredients together, and I'll just cream these together for 1 to 2 minutes until everything is light and creamy and has a little bit of air incorporated. Right on top now, I'm gonna add in my dry ingredients. You can do it in a different bowl, but I always like to do my dry right on top of my wet and then just whisk it. So I'm gonna start by adding just good old-fashioned all-purpose flour. So this cake is gonna have a combination of all-purpose flour and then cornmeal, just like you would in a cornbread. I'm gonna start by measuring out 1 3/4 of a cup of all-purpose flour. Make sure you level that off so you get a good measurement. Next, I'll add in 1/2 cup of yellow cornmeal. And you wanna make sure you're not using a self-rising cornmeal or a cornbread mix. You wanna make sure it's just plain, good old-fashioned cornmeal, and you could use yellow or white if you can find that. That'll be just the same. I'll add a tiny pinch of salt, not much because I always use salted butter in baking, so I don't need to add too much. And then I'm gonna grab my baking soda and my baking powder. I'll measure out 2 teaspoons of baking powder and 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda. You can use a beater again or just a good old-fashioned whisk, which I'm gonna do so I can mix in all those dry ingredients right on top. And then I'll mix everything together until it's fully incorporated. Now that my cornbread mixture has just come together, I'm gonna turn it into a berry cornbread mixture now, and I'm gonna add in a few of our blueberries and blackberries. And you can use any kind of berries you want to in this recipe. It's just a mixed berry recipe, so you could use blueberries, blackberries, raspberries, or a combination of any of those. So today I'm gonna use blueberries and blackberries. They're in season right now and so good and just my favorite. So I'm gonna add in a couple handfuls here of our blueberries and also throw in a few blackberries. I'll take my whisk and kind of just smash down the berries just a little bit so we get them to kind of break down and string throughout the cake. And then the rest of our berries we'll use for topping. So after I give those berries just a little bit of a smash, I'm gonna switch back to my spatula and just fold them in. You can see how beautiful it is once they start to turn their purpley color in it. And the whole batter won't turn purple, but you'll just have a little bit of that. And once it bakes up, it is just beautiful. So I'm gonna go ahead and mix that together lightly, and that batter is ready to go. Now I'm gonna grab my skillet that I had that butter melting in earlier. I'll just use a little pastry brush and make sure that all that butter is still kind of coating the sides, because we want to make sure we can get this cornbread cake out of the skillet when we're ready to serve and it's not going to stick. You also want to make sure you're using a 10-inch size skillet. That's the perfect size skillet for this cake, so if you have one of those, that's perfect. But if not, you could use a larger one. You'll just have a thinner cornbread. All right, that's ready to go. So now all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take that batter and pour it straight in. It's gonna be a little bit thick, but you can spread it out with a spatula just fine. It smells so good already. Now we're gonna top this cake with the rest of our berries. So first I'm gonna start with my blackberries because they're bigger, they take up a little more real estate on the top. So I'm gonna kind of decorate it with that, and then I'll fill in the rest with those blueberries. Okay, this is looking so beautiful. Now I've preheated my oven to 350 degrees and I'm gonna bake it for about 30 minutes. And then after 30 minutes, I'll cover it with a little bit of foil or parchment paper and bake it for another 10. Today's video is sponsored by Element. Hydrating properly is one of the best things that you can do to feel good, and healthy hydration is not just about drinking lots of water, it's about water and electrolytes. That's why I always have a package of Element electrolytes with me, and as we head into the cozier months, I love opting for one of their chocolate electrolytes. You just add a hot liquid and you have yourself an amazing drink. You can either do water or almond milk or even add your coffee to it, and it keeps you away from the coffee shop with all of the sugar, cookie, gingerbread, caramel lattes that make you feel just unwell. So opting for an electrolyte is gonna make you feel a whole lot better. It's gonna help with your cognition, your energy levels, your immune system. Element has so many different options to choose from. They even have sparkling water, so you can really find one to suit your lifestyle. So if you're ready to start feeling your best, you can get your free Element sample pack with any purchase. Just go to the link in the description below, drinkelement.com/healthy Elizabeth, and that is gonna give you free samples so you can try it out, see how you like it, and I know you're gonna feel great. Okay, it just came out of the oven, and now this is optional, but I like to sprinkle it with just a little bit of raw sugar over the top. It just makes the berries kind of glisten and have like a sugared berry look, but totally optional. But I just think it just adds the most beautiful little glisten to this, and a little crunch too. That looks perfect. Okay, so you can top this with a little bit of whipped cream or sour cream, Greek yogurt. I'm gonna use a little bit of creme fraiche just because it sounds fun. So let's go ahead and cut into this.
I wanted it. Yeah, I like that.
This has the most amazing smell. It's buttery and you can smell a little bit of cornmeal and the berries. Oh, it's amazing. You can top this with just a little bit of whipped cream or leave it plain like this. I'm gonna do a dollop of like a creamy creme fraiche, but that's totally optional. Just a little bit of that bitter cream goes really well with the sweetness of the berries, and the cornbread isn't overly sweet, so this is a dessert that's a little bit more mellow, not too sugary. This has to be one of my favorite skillet desserts I've ever made. Coming up, I'm bridging the gap between summer and fall. My summer vegetable chowder with all the produce and green chilies is comfort in a bowl. Tonight for dinner, I'm making a summer vegetable chowder. By the time summer starts to end, I'm definitely in the mood for soups and cozier cooking. So usually by this time of year, I'm ready to whip out my first batch of soup. The days are starting to cool off just a little bit, and so I'm excited for fall, but trying not to jump the gun on it. So today we're gonna make my summer vegetable chowder, and the star of the show here is definitely the corn, the zucchini, the squash, and the poblanos. So I'm gonna start by taking half a sweet onion. I'm using a Vidalia onion since they're in season right now, and I'm just gonna dice this up. We're gonna have lots of veggies to put in this soup today, along with a little bit of russet potatoes just to give this soup a little heartiness and make it a full meal, even though there's no meat in here. It's just vegetables and it's completely gluten-free. Anytime I'm chopping a lot of veggies, I like to have a bowl or a colander where I can just put everything in until we get it over to the pot. So I'm gonna go ahead and move my onion over to this little colander here so it's ready to go when I'm ready to start sauteing all of the veggies. The next thing I'm gonna grab are 2 poblanos. And poblanos are a really mild pepper. They're much more mild than jalapenos, so kids can definitely eat these. But if you can't find fresh poblano peppers, then you can definitely substitute it with a can of Hatch green chilies. It's gonna be just a hair spicier spicier, but there's so much cream and richness in this soup that it'll cut through that spice. So you can use half a can of that or a full can just to give it that really delicious peppery flavor. So I'm gonna de-seed my poblanos, remove the seeds and the core and the inside of the poblano peppers. Again, it's not like a jalapeno, it's closer to a bell pepper than anything. So I'm just gonna take out those seeds and we won't worry about the ribbing or anything, that'll be just fine. I like to just tap my peppers on the cutting board. It helps to knock out all those little extra seeds that like to hide in there. And then I'll just make long strips and finely dice it. I have a large stock pot heating up over medium heat, and I'm gonna add about 2 tablespoons of avocado oil and 1 tablespoon of butter, and I'm gonna get these onions and poblano sauteing, and get them nice and soft and tender, and then I'll come back over here and finish prepping the rest of the veggies. Next, I'm gonna chop up about 4 garlic cloves. I'll just crush them first, and then I'll use my little crusher here. It's a handy dandy tool, and I'll just crush it so that it melts into the soup, and there's not big chunks of the garlic. You really want it to be in every little bite. So the best way to do that is to use a garlic crusher or a garlic
Mom,
mincer.
I can cut it.
You can cut it? I think I'm gonna cut the garlic.
No, I want to do it.
I know you do. You can help crush it.
I like cutting it.
So I just like to crush it with my knife first, and then I'll put it into my garlic crusher once I remove the skin.
I like this on it.
And now we'll put it in the crusher, and we'll give it a little bit of a crush. You wanna do it? Can you press? Yeah.
I'm out to do
There you
one.
go.
I like to do one by my belt.
Here, put it in.
I'll do by my belt.
Okay. Somebody's taking over now. Good job. Now I'll grab my squash and my zucchini. I'm just using one of each. I'll just chop the ends off of those. And then I like to slice it in half down the middle. This one's kind of an oddly shaped one, but that's okay. And then I'll just run my knife straight through the center. And then we'll make just little bite-sized pieces. I like to make it kind of fine so it melts into the soup really well and everything is bite-sized. I'll do the same with the yellow squash. A little trick I do to cut the corn is I'll start in the middle of the cob and start cutting down there. That way the corn kernels don't fly all over the cutting board. It's a cool little trick. And so then you'll flip it over and do the same thing. Start in the middle and go down. Then I'll use the back of my knife to scrape the corn. That way all of that corn milk that's kind of stuck in where the kernels were attached to the cob, you want that all to go in the corn chowder. So just scrape that into your big pile of corn. Then in the pot, I had my sauteed onions and poblanos. I just added in the garlic last minute just so it could cook for a few minutes and not burn. And then I'm gonna add in all of that corn. I'm using 2 medium russet potatoes and I'm starting by peeling them. Then I'll cut them into about 1/4-inch cubes. I like them to be nice and small so that you can get a bite of potato along with everything else in the soup. Then I'll season the soup with a little bit of paprika, about half a teaspoon, and then half a teaspoon of dried parsley. And I'll pour in 32 ounces of chicken stock. You could also use bone broth here if you prefer. Then I'll add those potatoes in and bring everything to a nice hard boil. And then I'll turn it down, let those potatoes simmer for about 10 minutes until they're starting to become tender. And right at the end, add in that squash and just cook it for a few minutes until it's nice and tender too. And I like to spoon out a cup or two of the soup and I'll put that into a blender. You want to make sure that you're using a blender or a food processor, not an immersion blender, because you want to make sure you get a nice smooth puree to add back into the soup. Next, I'll end it with a little bit of half and half. And if you don't want to use dairy, you could substitute that with coconut milk. Next, I'm adding in half a tablespoon of sherry cooking wine, not vinegar. You want to make sure it's sherry wine. And then I'll add a couple dashes of hot sauce, and that just makes the perfect chowder taste. This makes me so excited for fall and to start planning all the things I want to cook. So make sure you leave me a comment letting me know what you're excited to make this fall. Don't forget to share this video with a friend. It's so much better than algorithms. And don't forget, you can check out my link to get your free sample pack from Element. Thanks again to Element for sponsoring today's video.